Thank you, and thank you for the time. We keep talking about the fact that we can take some balanced approach between spending cuts and revenues. I will tell you, I'm confused by the idea that there appear to be no spending cuts that can be taken. We have $60 billion of new revenue this year that we wouldn't have had last year, but we can't find $85 billion worth of cuts. Now, I'll accept the idea that nobody told anybody that this sequester was actually going to happen, even though it was in the law. I had a chance to be in a hearing with Secretary Carter this week, and I asked him what number that you submitted for the OMB budget planning for this year, and he said that they submitted a number based on a pre-sequester number. Is that right, Secretary?
That's right. The 14 budget preparation is based on that assumption.
And did you submit any alternative for what happens if you have to deal with the sequester number?
No, we have not done that yet.
So once again, we're not prioritizing. We're saying this is taking us by surprise. We don't have time to cut, but we're apparently not making any plan to take a cut next year either. Secretary Napolitano, what number did you submit to? Do you know? For the budget that the President's now putting together, what number?
The 14 budget.
Yes.
The 14 budget, I think the guidance was to go 5% below 12 enacted, but I'll have to double check that.
Why don't we just ask, what was the guidance from OMB on the 14 budget?
I think that's correct. It was 5% below the base 2012 enacted. And, you know, just to respond in real time to one of your earlier points, what's important to remember is the Budget Control Act of 2011 had within it roughly $1 trillion in discretionary spending cuts that are imposed through spending caps. Those were embodied in the President's 2013 budget.
Right.
And that obviously puts enormous budgetary pressure on our agencies. It requires us to make tough choices. The challenge right now is $85 billion over 7 months, and the way it's done so indiscriminately across every program, project, and activity, that's the challenge that you can plan for, but you can't avoid the harmful impacts of.
Well, I accept that, but the idea that we need to cut spending, but it needs to be a balanced approach, seems to me to fly in the face of the idea that nobody has any ideas how to reach this goal, even if half of it is revenue. And it seems to me we're not planning that very well either. Well, I want to ask a couple of questions. Secretary Donovan, you said, just to clarify for me, on a reservation funding issue, you said our funding would be cut by 1/3 to a specific reservation. I assume that's the payment in lieu of taxes money. And why would it be 1/3? You're trying to find 5% doubled in the end of the year. I could see 10%. You can get back to me if you don't know why it's 1/3.
I'm sorry, if you could just be, I'm not clear on
your testimony. In your testimony, you mentioned a specific education funding in a reservation that would be cut by 1/3 in the remainder of this year. Do you have any reason?
I believe it was in Secretary Duncan's.
I'm sorry, I meant Secretary Duncan.
It's all Secretary Donovan's fault.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
I'm inclined to blame Secretary Duncan. But no, you said that, Secretary Duncan.
Yes, sir. This is impact aid. This is aid that goes out to Native American areas, goes out to areas where there are military families and bases.
Right.
We would have to cut this money right away. And we disproportionately fund those areas because there's a lack of property taxes. And in that specific example, 1/3 of that district's budget, their school budget.
So the combination of the cuts they would, in a normal district could take, plus the sort of payment in lieu of taxes money, the impact aid money that we give.
Right. And again, and this would happen now, this is not down the road.
Would be 1/3.
Yes,
on another issue, Mr. Werner, I'm going to ask an OMB question here, Mr. Werfel, and we told you we might ask about this. I've got some correspondence here from USDA, the committee that Senator Pryor and I will be working on, the Ag Committee, on questions about on-site inspectors, which if they don't show up at a meat processing facility, that facility can't open. You know, other kinds of food processing, the FDA can come by occasionally, and that doesn't really impact whether that plant can be open or not. But if the USDA inspector doesn't show up, the plant can't open, is there any way to prioritize those kinds of individuals showing up so 100 other workers or 1,000 other workers can show up that day?
Unfortunately, I don't think there is, Senator. The way the budget is structured for the Food Safety Inspection Service at USDA is that 88% of their total funding is spent on salaries and benefits for frontline personnel that are doing the very inspections you referred to. So it becomes a math issue ultimately. They're going to get a certain amount of budget that will be, if we hit the sequester, will be canceled. And there's no way in which to find other sources of funds because 88% of the entire budget are those very people that need to be at those meat plants doing that inspection to keep them open. So this is one of the very tangible and clear and significant impacts of sequester is that this division within USDA will not be able to make its core mission of sending the inspectors to these locations, and therefore, under appropriate laws and regulations, there'll be stoppages of work within those areas. So it's a very serious concern.
Well, one of the questions we'll be asking, Chairman, will be how do you prioritize the core mission and the legal requirement to be at that Purdue facility or that whatever packing facility they need to be at, and we'll be asking that.